In this video, I'll talk about how web front-end developers will create the user interface in a web-based application. I want to go over it in very basic detail, go nice and slowly, so it'll take 2 or 3 sessions to do this. So, going back to the basic architecture we've been working with, the client-server architecture, just to remind you. We've got a client who has the user interface on their laptop running in a web browser. They maybe type in someone's name and address or press a button because they want to find information about that person. That request from the client finds its way to the server. The server will respond to the request, do a database lookup for the information, for example, that's been asked for, and then it will serve the appropriate content back. So that's where we've got the client and server model. So what I want to focus on today is the client part and how we create the user interface. Okay, so we'll basically use the hypertext markup language. So we use that to create web page content, only content. And I'll explain what I mean by only content as we go along. So the browser, which itself is a program, when you run Internet Explorer or, well, no, hopefully not Internet Explorer, Edge or Chrome or whatever, then that's a program. It runs a program, loads it into RAM, starts executing, and it looks like a web browser. You then type in the address of a web page, or it could be in a file on your computer. You type in the file path and the web browser will read the content of the HTML file and it will interpret whatever it finds in there. Okay, so as it reads the text, it will write the information in that text file or HTML file onto the screen. The format of HTML is really simple. You literally have a less than symbol to begin the start tag and a greater than symbol ends the start tag. So that lump there is the start tag. There can be some content which may be viewable on the page and then there's an end tag to tell the browser we've finished with this particular HTML element. So the whole thing in one lump is an HTML element, and it consists of, not always, but typically 3 parts: the start tag, some content, and the end tag. If there's no content necessary, then we probably don't need an end tag and we'd only need to use a start tag. But just to get the syntax around in your head, so we've got a less than symbol and a start tag name, and then a greater than symbol. That's the end of the start tag. And potentially some content. If we've got an end tag, then we've got a less than symbol. We write in the end tag and a greater than symbol. And what are these tags then? And also, what's this optional attribute? So the tag is going to define which area or which element, which HTML element are we talking about. And we don't even know what they are yet, so bear with me. An attribute can provide us with a bit more information about what we want to do with that HTML element when we come to display it. So the format or the syntax of an attribute, if you have one, it would appear inside the start tag, and it's literally whatever the attribute name is equals whatever value you want it to be inside double quotes. This will all become clear shortly. The end tag is quite simple. The end tag is exactly the same name as the start tag, but it's got a / in front of it to indicate to the browser that this is the end of a tag. Okay, the structure of a document, an HTML document, is very simple. We start off with HTML. There's a start tag. So that's an HTML element called HTML, telling the browser that the content from this point onwards will be HTML. And then down here is the end tag to say, right, we've now finished HTML, that's it. So you see it's the same as a start tag, but it's got a / in front of it. Within the HTML, so everything inside here delineates HTML. Inside here there are two blocks. One is called the head and one's called the body. The head, so the head element is made up of a start tag called head in exactly the same syntax as it is up here. There's no attribute in this one, and the end tag is the same as start with a /. Then we put some head stuff in there, right where that is. Then the main bit is the body. The body is where all the stuff goes that you're going to see on the page. So it starts with body. We put all the stuff in here that we want to display, and then we say /body. That's the end of it, so the browser knows that the body section's finished. Okay, so that's all you need to remember, is the start tag looks like this, less than or greater than symbol with an HTML element name, and the end of it is a slash with the same name. Okay, so here's some examples. This one's a special one. I've already put it on here because you sometimes see this in HTML documents these days. It's not really necessary anymore because this was created to indicate that this is the browser reads this and says, oh, this is HTML5. We don't use anything but HTML5 these days. You might have some real old legacy stuff that uses older versions, but because anything new uses HTML5, you could even leave that out and it would default to HTML5. Looking at the proper HTML elements then, there's the HTML one I just discussed, there's the head one I just discussed, the body one I just discussed. Here's one that I've not discussed yet, called title. The start element is start tag is title. You can put in here some text which will be the title, like maybe my first page, and then /title to end it. Now the title doesn't mean to say that it's going to be displayed on the page. The title will actually display whatever you write in here. It'll display it on the tab that opens in the browser. So you know, as you open each new tab in a browser, if you look up there, you can have a little icon and you can have some writing next to it to tell the person roughly what that page is about. I'll demonstrate that in a second. H1 to H6, these are headings, a bit like section headings in Word. This allows you to structure the page, so it makes it clear to anyone reading this that this is the structure of the page. You've got maybe have the heading 1 as the title, and heading 2 as a first chapter, or whatever. Not only does it help distinguish the different sections for the normal reader, but also web crawlers, they crawl the internet all the time looking for new web pages, and when they find them they will read things like this to determine what the page is about, what its structure is, and what to put in the search term when you do a Google search. Even more importantly is that for visually impaired users, they can't see the format of the document. So by splitting it up into heading 1, heading 2, heading 3 or whatever, the speech reader, not speech reader, the text reader, that text-to-speech reader will tell the person that this is a heading 1, so they can visualize that, oh, that's the title. Oh, this is heading 2, so okay, it's a subsection. For basic paragraph text, just to create a paragraph, then it's just, the start tag is just P, put your text in, the end tag is P. If you want to force a line break, then you can just use this BR, and because a line break doesn't need any more information, then there's no need for an end tag. It's quite clear to the browser that that's a single operation, so there's no need for anything else to be added. We don't really tend to use these breaks anymore. There are other ways of doing this, but anyway, there it is, and I'll probably use it initially just to get started. Image is a strange one because you think, oh, image, that's going to be a complicated one. It's actually even simpler than the others because there's no end tag needed, because in an image we use the start tag, which is image or img, and the browser requires an attribute. This one is not optional. You need to tell it where is the source of the image. So in here you can write either a URL for sort of image on the internet, or a file name if it's on your computer, and that's it. Close this start tag. There's nothing else to write. That's enough information for the browser to go and find that image and display it. Another very popular one, which is very peculiarly named, is the anchor tag. I think I'd prefer to have called this the link or something like that, because this is the thing that puts the underlines under text, and when you click on them it goes somewhere or does something. But anyway, it's called an anchor tag, and so its HTML name is A. So the start tag is A, and there's the end of the start tag. Then there's some text. This is the text that you want to be underlined, and then we finish it and say to the browser, right, that's the end of the definition of this anchor, so /A. An attribute in here, optional, but it wouldn't do anything if you didn't have this. This is the link to where you want it to jump to. So this is href, and so it's a hypertext reference equals, and then just the URL. It doesn't have to be URL. It can jump somewhere else in the same document to another different web page in your website, or a different part of the page you're currently looking at. But either way, you put in there as an attribute where you want to jump to once the user clicks on this text here. We can identify HTML elements. Well, don't worry about this bit. I'm not going to really talk about this or this next bit. Just pretend you didn't see that, because I'm going to put that in later when we look at cascading style sheets. Right, I've taken those two bits out now. I meant to take them out before, and so that last bit then leads us on to a demo. So what I'll do is I'll do a little demo in Visual Studio Code, and then for those of you who don't have access to Visual Studio Code, I'll use an online free service, but I want to show what the file looks like when written properly, as opposed to using one of these so I call it sort of playground applications. So if you're using Visual Studio Code, literally just download that for free off the internet, and we can create a new file. So if I say open a folder, so I want somewhere to put the file, and then let's pick somewhere, where shall I put it? Stick it in there and just call it junk. Because I'm going to delete this afterwards. Right, so now I've opened a folder called junk, and you can see I've now got a view of that folder. So let's have a new file. I just click that button there. Right, that was the wrong button. Let's go new file then. So I'll call it test.html. HTML. And save it in junk. Okay, so here's my file. I've not typed anything in yet. If I put the basics in that I showed you in the in the slides, Visual Studio Code being a sort of an IDE, integrated development environment, does a lot of things for you. It helps you out. So if I type HTML, it'll put the brackets in for me because they're a bit of a nuisance typing the brackets in. If you're not using this, you probably just have to handball them in. I explained also there's a head section and a body section. Okay, now in the head section I mentioned an element before called title. So if I put title, and it goes in the head section because this is not displayable on the page. And to try and tidy up your code a bit, you could indent it a couple of lines just to show that it's just part of this block. Or if you use Visual Studio Code, a neat trick is if you press Shift Alt and then press F, hold Shift and Alt down, then press F, it'll format it for you, which is quite handy. So it says first HTML. Now that's going to display on the web page. Now I could just run this now and it will open a web browser. So I can do that. Run. I can run it in a debugger. I want to start debugging which browser do I want to use. So I'll use Chrome. So that's opened a Chrome web page over here, and you see it's running a file, so it's in C colon blah blah whatever, and there is the title. That's what's come up as a title. So if I just fit all these on one screen so you can see them better, then refresh that. Right, first HTML. So I would change this to on the tab. Okay. Look at the tab. If I refresh that, it shows on the tab. And it's got a default icon. We can make it have an icon of our own if we want to. Now, rather than keep running a web browser and running the debugger like this, which I'll close with that little square symbol, then Visual Studio Code is very extendable. If you go to this bit here for extensions, you can see I've got quite a lot of extensions built in, and one of them is going to allow me to look at static web pages within the environment, but I can't remember what it's called. I'll just scroll down here and see if I can find it. Oh, there it is. It's called Live Preview. It's from Microsoft. So all you do is to get this, you just type in the search Live Preview. It'll do a search and there's Live Preview, and you can just install it. You can very quickly uninstall them if you don't like them. I'm not going to install it because I've already got it. And what that will do for us is, if I look at this code here, I can do a live preview of it by clicking. It'll add this to the menu, this live preview thing, and it's going to show me what the page will look like. So there you see it says on the tab, but it'll show me in real time. So if I change this, we can see it actually editing in real time. My tab. Alright, let's add some more interesting stuff in. So let's say that we wanted to create a little static website, a little blog type site about our trip to Ben Nevis. Then you might think, okay, well, I'll put a title on, but it's not a title like this one. I'm going to give it a heading. Heading 1, Ben Nevis. And so there we go, it's got a big title to indicate the start of my web page. Then you might want to put some text in. So let's just grab a lump of text. Add that in. Let's make this a bit wider. Alright, and then just for the sake of it, add a bit more text. Don't forget, this has got to be inside the body, so I must push that down a bit. So notice that even though in the browser I've got this indented here, I've got a blank line there to separate the paragraphs, and that's indented, whereas what it shows is just one big block of code or block of text. And that's because we've not told the browser how to display this on the page. It's not going to display it as it's written in here. It's going to look for instructions of how to display it. If we want this to look like 2 paragraphs, we need to tell it that these are 2 paragraphs. So we need the start paragraph, P, and it helpfully puts in the end tag, which I don't actually want in this case because the end is after the paragraph. Sometimes it's a bit more helpful than you want it to be. And you see that's actually separated that out into a paragraph now. Similarly, you can put as many spaces in here as you want. It won't make any difference on there. We want to make this a paragraph as well. Yeah, I don't want that, thank you. And then I'll close the paragraph off here. And we don't want that bit there. We just want to, it's just trying to be too helpful. Alright, so I've now got 2 paragraphs, and so that's why the paragraph element is needed to be able to format this. Doesn't matter how I write it in here. It's going to make no difference to this. Okay. I just pressed Shift Alt F just to tidy this code up in here. Right, if you don't have Visual Studio Code, then you might want to use one of the online tools instead. So I'll move this out of the way, and one I just picked up randomly. I've not got any particular preference for this, it just came up, and it's at jsbin.com. Let's take that out. Type in jsbin.com and it comes up with this page. And it's put some stuff in for you, some boilerplate stuff to start off with. But like I said before, don't get confused with this extra stuff it's put in. We could remove that line and it'll still work. And we can move these 2 lines and it'll still work. And here's the title. Now it's not showing us a full view of the web browser, so you're not going to see that title there like you could in VS Code. You'll only see that if we save this as a file and then look at it as a proper in a proper web browser. But the structure is the same. Here's the body. Just put up a couple of blank lines in. So all I need to do is exactly the same information that I put into the VS Code. I'll just copy it and paste it into here. And this is the output, as long as you've got HTML pressed. So now if I just messed about with it like that, you can see it's not making any difference over here, but I don't have that fancy auto editing feature built in here. I'll have to press the space bar and such to try and get it tidied up. Okay, so let's just add some more things. I'll stop in here because this one will cover everybody. I just wanted to show how you would use the Visual Studio Code if you wanted to. So let's say we wanted an unordered list. Let's say we wanted some bullet points here about Ben Nevis. Then I've got a bit more typing to do with using this. I'm not very good at typing. So to create an unordered list, in other words a bullet list, we have a UL for unordered list. And it's handy to put the end tag in as well, then you don't forget. And then we know we can write our list in between here. So this is the list. Within the list, we need some list items. So to create a list item, we have the element li for list item. Type in whatever you want, and then close it off with end list item. Just type your text in there. So I'm not going to type all that in. I've got something here when I prepared earlier. Let's type that in. Okay, so you see it's actually indented that and bullet pointed it. And I could have another list item. It doesn't matter how you format the tags, you can put them at the end, start, and end like that if you want to keep the space a bit less, or you can write it like that if you think that looks better. In other words, you might think, oh okay, I'm going to show the structure by doing it like that. If you want to put the space in, if you want, please yourself. As long as you've got the syntax right, you start with the start tag, you end with the end tag, and it's going to display the stuff in the middle. So there's a couple of bullet points. Then you might think, oh well, let's have some photos of Ben Nevis. So we don't want to use heading level 1 because we've used that for a title. That'll be confusing. We want a sub level of this. So let's use a heading level 2. So H2 instead of H1. And I just said photos of Ben Nevis, put in there whatever you want. And you can see the browser's automatically formatted it as being a bit smaller than this, but we can change the format and the size and everything about how this looks at a later date. And just for the sake of using another heading, we'll say a subheading of photos of Ben Nevis can be the specific photo. So we'll have a photo of the observatory. So I'm going to use a level heading 3 for that. Now, if you're in this world, it's not so straightforward to reference a file on your disk. In VS Code I could have just picked up a file that was in my local directory, but in here I don't have a picture online of the observatory, so I just have to pick some other random photo. So what we need is, if you remember, we need the image, img, and we need to tell the browser where the image is. So the image is going to be src, that's the source of it. This is an attribute, so its source equals, and then wherever we're going to put in here is inside speech marks, and this is where it's going to be. So had I been doing this VS Code, I'd have said something like C colon whatever blah 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 observatory.jpg, but because I'm doing it in here, I'm going to find a random picture online instead. Okay, so I've gone to a free website called Pixabay. It's got some photos, and I just picked one up that looks a bit like a mountain. So just put the source in there. Let's have a look at it. Oh, it looks a lot like a mountain. It's more like a lake really, with a mountain around it. It'll do. So you can see that's shown the picture. It's a pretty big picture. You know, it's a picture anyway, and that's what image has done for us. You might think, that's a bit big. And you might also think, but what about the blind people? They're not going to know what that is. You've got observatory, although I probably should have called it something better. I'll make it more sensible and change that to, since I'm working in this environment, I'll call it oops, it is a bit lame, lake. And it's supposed to be a photo of Ben Nevis. It's not going well, this, is it? Right, that'll do. The content doesn't make any difference, but you might think, oh, it's a bit big, I want it a bit smaller. And because it's a web-based thing, we've got this really long URL, but it's just one attribute. That there is just one attribute. That to the end of the speech marks. You can have more than one attribute. We can type in another attribute. For example, the image has another attribute called width equals speech marks, and then we can type in what width we want in pixels. So let's say, let's try 400. Oh, that's better. And the browser's resized it to 400 wide, and it's made the height proportionate to the same proportion as the image was in the first place. If you wanted to alter the proportion, you could set the height, but that usually makes the pictures look a bit weird. Let's make the height 200. So you can see it's squashed it down a bit. It depends whether you want to keep it proportionate or not. But you can add these attributes in as you wish. Another thing about an image is that if you've got a blind user, it'll say Lake with a mountain, but it doesn't say much more about it. You might want to provide a bit more description of this for people who can't actually see it. And so you can use alt, an alt attribute for alternate text. So alt equals, and then you can type in here, oops, what did I do? Oh, fat finger syndrome. Alt equals a lake surrounded by a mountain with snow on the peaks. Now you can't see that because you can see the picture, so there's no need for you to see it. But what will happen is when the screen reader comes across an image tag, it will look for the alt attribute and read that out, so the reader can try to visualize what this picture looks like. Also, that doubles up for, let's say for example, somebody removed this picture because it's not my picture, it's come from this Pixabay place. Say they decided to rename it or move it and you didn't know about it. Let's just change that. So there is no picture anymore. But what it's showing us is there's a picture placeholder, but it's going to give us the alt text so we can see what it would have been had we had access to that picture. So that's just another little thing. And also you can have another attribute if you want called title equals, and what this will do is it'll create a rollover caption if you really want one. I mean, I've already explained what this picture is, but just in case you wanted one, because you might have other pictures that are it's not so clear what they mean. So title equals, again, speech marks, that's the way the attributes work, and this is just going to be that's obvious what it is. Let's say lake in Scotland, in case you didn't know where Ben Nevis was. and then when you roll over, you see, if I roll that over the picture now, it says it's a lake in Scotland. Okay, so those attributes can add a lot of extra features to these basic HTML tags. Let's just look at a final one now, and that's the anchor tag. That's a very popular tag, or a link tag as I prefer to call it. But anyway, it has to be called an A tag, an anchor tag. So let's just put the start in there, and then the content. The content is, I'll say, just copy this out because you can see my typing is not great. I think I'm dyslexic and type stuff in back to front. More info on Ben Nevis, and I'll have an end tag for that anchor. And you can see it's showing the text, but it's not pointing anywhere, it's not linking to anything. I need to give it an attribute. href equals to attribute, so we want the resulting speech marks. Where do we want it to go when you click it? So I'm going to send us to Wikipedia. So I'm going to put a link in for Wikipedia there, and as you can see, it doesn't work. That's because you don't get any feedback in HTML about what errors might be. An IDE might help you a bit. You're not going to get any help in here. This doesn't work because you look at the image tag, I put all that stuff in there, and it all seemed to work, but the command after it doesn't work because I haven't closed the image tag off. Now it works, so it can be quite frustrating fault finding all this stuff. And also, because I'm not in VS Code, I haven't got the facility to tidy this up automatically, so I'll have to do a couple of taps. And you think, oh, I don't really want it there, I prefer to put it underneath. Now again, in HTML we don't have much flexibility around how we can lay out the page. That's something we'll do in a later session called cascading style sheets, but just to budge it a bit, in this point here, if you remember, I talked about a BR tag. That BR is a line break tag, so let's push it down underneath. And if you think, oh, I'd like a bit more space than that, and you can budge it a bit more with another one if you want, and it's moved it down a bit. The point of this is, if I click on that now, it is active. It just go to where you want it to go. Now again, because this is not a proper web browser, and it's not a development environment, there doesn't seem to be any way to get back. Not that I've actually seen. And what's this thing here? Let's have a bash at this. Oh, that live preview is actually going to launch it in what looks more like a web browser, but it doesn't work properly because that link's not working. Until I've not really used this before. Maybe I need to save a snapshot. Let's try that. And oh, the preview's not there anymore. Output, preview. Try that. Oh, that's better. So now we should be able to see what's written on the tab. What's written on the tab is what they put in. Here, look, JS bin. We can call it Ben Nevis with a space in it. Save that snapshot. Go to the preview. Let's see if we can refresh that. Yeah, there we go. Ben Nevis. And here we are. the link works, and because it now is displaying it in a browser, we can should be able to go back to where we came from, like that. Okay, so I didn't even know that was there, so you have to have the output visible. There's a little arrow there to take you to a web browser to see what it really looks like. Right, so you've got a choice. You can use this. It's quite good, really, considering it's free. Or I could just take this code, copy it into Visual Studio Code to show it would have done the same thing in here. So there's the internal view, and again this is limited in that if I clicked on that, it doesn't actually work properly with the external viewer. So what it's done is it's opened the web page. I'll just show you the web page, because it needs a proper web browser to be able to show it what it really looks like. There, we can go there, we can come back again. This also gives you some color coding, gives you some help when you're typing stuff in, but at this level it doesn't make a big deal of difference. Just one other thing that I've noticed about this is, once you've taken a snapshot, you can then download, and you can download your source code and you can save it somewhere. So there's junk. It's called it this silly name. You can leave it like that, or call it, well, let's call it something more sensible. Nemis. And then we can find that file. Now it's been saved as an HTML file. Which is here. If I double click that now, we can launch an HTML file from WinFile Explorer. Double click that and let's go up on a different screen. Let's come up here. And there we are. That works. So you can save your file even in this web-based thing. Okay, that's the basics. That's the introduction to the basics, where we can create a fairly basic web page, which isn't that one. Looks like my session may have crashed. Yeah, okay. It's a fairly basic web page for a blog, or just to show people your photos or whatever else it is. In the next session I'll show some slightly more advanced controls that will allow us to create a user interface. There's no user interface here, this is just a read-only thing. You can't type stuff in and press buttons or do anything of that sort. So we'll move on to that in the next session. So I hope that was useful.